The drive to the cabin was supposed to clear Jack Travers's head. He'd imagined himself cruising along the winding mountain roads, watching the sun dip behind jagged peaks, while the scent of pine mingled with the crisp, high-altitude air. Instead, his car's stereo was stuck on static, the heating system smelled like burnt socks, and every curve of the road seemed hell-bent on spilling his travel mug of lukewarm coffee into his lap. "This is it," he muttered, slowing the car as the rickety wooden sign for Cedar Hollow appeared, half hidden by vines. It wasn't much of a town, just a gas station, a diner, and a post office run by a guy named Dale, who always seemed mildly suspicious of anyone mailing more than one package at a time, but it was the last speck of civilization before the wilderness. Jack squinted through his windshield as the road turned rough, bumping and jostling his car. The forest pressed in on either side, dark and dense, the towering pines giving way only for the occasional sliver of moonlight. It had been years since he'd come to the cabin. Work, relationships, and life's general chaos had kept him tethered to the city. Now, burned out from late nights coding for a company that treated him like an overworked algorithm, he was desperate for a reset. "I need this," Jack said aloud, as if convincing himself. But as he rounded the last bend, his heart skipped a beat. The cabin was there just as he remembered it, tucked into a clearing at the edge of a slope. But something was wrong. The windows, which should have been dark and cold, were glowing faintly. A warm, pulsating light spilled out from behind the curtains, casting strange, shifting patterns onto the porch. Jack slammed on the brakes, his car skidding slightly on the gravel. Okay, what the hell? For a moment he sat frozen, his hands gripping the wheel. He hadn't told anyone he was coming here. The cabin was too remote for squatters to stumble across it, and he couldn't imagine the local wildlife had suddenly developed a taste for interior decorating. Then a thought struck him. "Maybe it's Dale," he whispered, though the idea of the grumpy postmaster setting up camp in his cabin was almost more absurd than what he was seeing. Grabbing his flashlight and his phone, just in case he needed to call the police or, more realistically, Dale, Jack got out of the car. The forest was eerily silent. Even the usual sounds of chirping crickets and rustling leaves seemed to have vanished, replaced by a faint hum, low and resonant, that seemed to come from the direction of the cabin. "Great," Jack muttered. "I came out here to escape stress, and now I'm walking into a horror movie." As he approached the cabin, he crouched behind a tree, peering at the scene ahead. Through a small gap in the curtains, he could see movement, shadows dancing in a rhythmic, almost fluid way. He couldn't make out any details, but the light was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It wasn't just shining, it was alive, pulsing in waves, as if the cabin itself was breathing. Jack shifted slightly, and his foot snapped a twig. The shadows inside froze. "Nice one, Travers," he muttered, heart pounding. Before he could decide whether to retreat or charge in swinging his flashlight like a weapon, the front door creaked open. Jack held his breath, expecting, well, he didn't know what to expect. A bear? An axe-wielding maniac? Dale with a lantern and a sandwich? What he saw was none of those things. A figure stepped into the doorway, silhouetted against the glowing interior. It was humanoid, but there was something off. The proportions were just slightly wrong, too tall, too elegant, with limbs that moved in a way that was both graceful and unsettling. Then the figure turned, and Jack got a glimpse of its face. Or her face, he realized. It was definitely feminine, but alien in the truest sense of the word. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, catching the faint light in iridescent waves. Her eyes were large and without pupils, glowing faintly with a soft, golden hue. Her hair, or at least what looked like hair, floated gently around her head, as if caught in an invisible breeze. Jack's first coherent thought was, "This is not happening." His second thought was, "I really should have brought more coffee." The alien woman tilted her head, as if listening to something he couldn't hear. Then, with a startling swiftness, she darted back inside, slamming the door shut behind her. "Okay," Jack whispered to himself, backing up a step. So, not Dale. Despite every instinct screaming at him to leave, Jack found himself edging closer to the cabin. His curiosity warred with his fear, and curiosity was winning. He reached the porch, his heart hammering in his chest. The hum was louder now, almost like a low-frequency vibration that he could feel in his bones. Tentatively, he pressed his ear against the wooden door. Seriously? The voice startled him so badly that he yelped and nearly fell off the porch. Spinning around, he found himself face to face with the alien woman, who had somehow snuck outside without making a sound. She stared at him, unblinking, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. Jack raised his hands, palms out. Hi. I live here?" The woman tilted her head again, this time with what he swore was an expression of exasperation. She said something, but the sound that came out was like a mix of musical tones and static, utterly incomprehensible. Jack blinked. "Sorry, I don't speak whatever that is." She sighed, a universal gesture it seemed, and reached into a pouch at her side. Pulling out a small disc-like device, she pressed a button, and a burst of holographic symbols hovered in the air between them. The device emitted a short burst of static before a robotic voice translated, "Leave." "Dangerous." Jack frowned. "Dangerous? What's dangerous?" The alien woman pointed emphatically at him, then at herself, then back at the cabin. "Oh, great," Jack said, throwing up his hands. "I drive 5 hours to get away from life's insanity, and now there's a glowing space lady telling me to leave my own cabin. This is fine. Totally normal." The woman stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, to Jack's astonishment, she rolled her eyes, an unmistakable gesture of shared frustration. "Well," Jack said, lowering his hands and attempting a weak smile, "since we're both having a bad night, how about we start over? Hi, I'm Jack. You are—" The alien hesitated, then pressed another button on her device. "Lyra," the robotic voice translated. Jack nodded. "Lyra. Nice to meet you, I guess." He paused, glancing at the glowing cabin. "So, why are you in my house?" Lyra sighed again, but this time there was something almost human about it. With a resigned wave of her hand, she gestured for Jack to follow her inside. As he stepped through the doorway, Jack realized 2 things. First, the interior of his cabin was almost unrecognizable, transformed into a strange high-tech sanctuary filled with glowing orbs, floating panels, and a peculiar humming device in the corner that looked suspiciously like it could explode. Second, whatever he'd just walked into, it was about to turn his entire life upside down. "Great," he muttered under his breath. "Should have just stayed at Dale's." Jack stood in the middle of what was once his rustic, cozy mountain getaway. The log walls and worn furniture were still there, somewhere, but they'd been overtaken by glowing, humming, and downright incomprehensible alien technology. Strange, translucent panels floated in mid-air, displaying shifting symbols that reminded him of a hyperactive screensaver. The air was warmer, thicker, and smelled faintly of ozone and— was that mint? His gaze landed on a spherical device in the corner, softly humming and emitting a pulsing golden light. "That thing," Jack muttered, pointing at it, "looks like it's about 5 seconds away from either exploding or summoning a demon." Lyra, standing by the device with an expression that screamed, "I regret everything," tapped her translator again. "Not explosion. Stabilizer." Jack blinked. "Oh, great. A stabilizer, because that clears everything up." Lyra tilted her head in what he was starting to recognize as her version of a sarcastic eye roll. She pressed a button on the stabilizer, and the hum lowered a pitch. The glowing panels flickered and rearranged themselves, revealing more of the cabin's original interior. "That's my recliner," Jack said, pointing at the corner now partially visible. "And my coffee table. Glad to see they survived. Whatever this is." Lyra ignored him, focused on adjusting a sequence of controls that floated in the air before her. Her silver, almost liquid-like skin shimmered faintly as she worked. Jack tried not to stare, but it was hard not to. Everything about her was fascinating and terrifying. "So," he said after a moment, his voice intentionally casual, You want to tell me why my cabin looks like a set from Star Trek? She paused, glancing at him, then pressed another button on her translator. The robotic voice responded, refuge, hiding, emergency. Jack folded his arms. Right, emergency. That's pretty vague. Did you, crash your spaceship nearby or something? Lyra hesitated, as if deciding how much to tell him. Finally, she motioned toward a small, flickering hologram that appeared above the stabilizer. It was a schematic of a sleek, elongated vessel with jagged edges that gave it an almost predatory look. Parts of the ship were highlighted in red, clearly indicating damage. That's your ship? Jack asked. Was, the translator replied. Wait. Jack held up a hand. You're telling me that thing crashed here? How? I didn't hear anything. No big explosions, no sonic booms, nothing. Lyra pointed toward the schematic, then made a motion with her hand that resembled a slow fade-out. The translator chimed. Silent entry. Cloaking. Minimal impact. Of course, Jack muttered, because if aliens are going to crash on Earth, they'll do it politely. Lyra didn't laugh, but there was a faint twitch at the corner of her mouth. Okay, Jack said, pacing now. So your ship crashed. And instead of, phoning home or finding another planet, you decided to break into my cabin and turn it into your own personal tech lab. Isolated, the translator replied. Safe. No threat. Jack stopped mid-step. No threat? Are you saying I'm harmless? Lyra nodded, her golden eyes scanning him briefly before returning to her controls. Wow, Jack said, feigning offense. You meet me for 5 minutes and you've already decided I'm no threat? I'll have you know I was very intimidating in high school. The translator didn't bother responding to that. Jack sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, I get it. You've got problems. You needed a place to crash, literally. But this is still my cabin. You can't just invade it. At the word invade, Lyra stiffened. Her glowing eyes narrowed, and her posture shifted ever so slightly, as if preparing for something. Jack immediately backpedaled. Not like that, he said quickly. I mean, you're not invading like an alien invasion or anything, right? You're just borrowing. She relaxed slightly, but there was a tension in the air now that Jack couldn't ignore. Okay, he said, holding up his hands. How about this? You tell me why you're here, and I promise not to freak out. Deal? Lyra hesitated again, then pressed another button on her translator. Fleeing. Pursued. Jack frowned. Pursued? By who? The translator emitted a series of clicks and static, followed by the word, hunters. Hunters? Jack repeated. Like alien bounty hunters? That's a thing? Lyra nodded solemnly. Jack let out a low whistle. Well, that's just great. My cabin isn't just an alien Airbnb, it's the hideout for a fugitive. I'm guessing these hunters don't care much about property damage, huh? Lyra shook her head. Jack sank into his recliner, staring at the ceiling. You know, I came out here to relax, get away from stress, maybe write a book or learn how to whittle or something. Instead, I've got glowing space tech and intergalactic bad guys on my doorstep. Fantastic. Lyra watched him for a moment, then pressed a few more buttons on her translator. Not safe, it said. Must leave. Yeah, I got that part, Jack said. But here's the thing. I can't just leave. This is my place. I don't exactly have a second cabin lying around. The translator responded with a flat, robotic monotone. Regret. Jack chuckled despite himself. Oh, now you feel bad? That's comforting. Lyra tilted her head, clearly not understanding the sarcasm. All right, Jack said, standing up. If we're stuck with each other for now, we might as well figure out a way to keep this place from getting blown to bits by your hunters. Got any ideas? Lyra hesitated, then tapped a sequence on one of the glowing panels. A holographic display appeared, showing a cluster of small, sleek ships circling the area near the cabin. The translator chimed. Scouts. Searching. Jack swallowed hard. How long until they find you? Or us, I guess. Lyra didn't respond directly. Instead, she pointed to the stabilizer, then to the golden pulsing device in the corner. The translator said, "Incomplete. Need time." Jack stared at her. "You're fixing some kind of... what? An alien power core? A cloaking device?" "Both," the translator replied. "Of course," Jack muttered. "Why not make it more complicated? While you're at it, can you also install a hot tub? Maybe a pizza oven?" Lyra gave him a blank look, which was somehow more unnerving than an actual glare. "Never mind," Jack said, rubbing his temples. "The point is, we're on a clock, right? We have to finish your... whatever this is before they find us." Lyra nodded. "All right," Jack said, forcing himself to stay calm. "Let's do this. You tell me what you need and I'll help. But for the record, if your hunters show up and start blasting holes in my cabin, you're paying for the repairs." The translator chirped. "Agree." Jack stared at her, unsure if she was serious or just humoring him. Either way, he had a feeling his quiet weekend getaway was about to get a whole lot louder and weirder. Jack woke the next morning to the soft rhythmic hum of alien machinery and a vague sense of dread. He squinted against the golden light filtering through the window, or more accurately, through what used to be a window. It was now some kind of shimmering force field that hummed when he poked it the night before. He hadn't slept well, thanks to dreams of glowing-eyed hunters blasting his cabin into splinters. "Morning," Jack muttered, dragging himself off the couch. He hadn't dared sleep in his bed, which had been thoroughly commandeered by a floating dome-shaped contraption that looked suspiciously like a high-tech coffee maker. Lyra was already awake, or did she even sleep, and standing by the stabilizer, her delicate hands moving with lightning speed over a holographic interface. Her shimmering silver skin caught the morning light, making her look more like a sculpture than a person. "Do aliens even do mornings?" Jack asked, running a hand through his bedhead. Lyra glanced at him but didn't respond. Her translator device was lying on the table next to a bowl of half-eaten cereal. Jack stared at it. "Wait," he said, pointing. "Did you eat that? Or did my cabin just conjure up floating tech and a ghost that likes frosted flakes?" Lyra picked up the translator and pressed a button. The robotic voice replied, "Tried." "Insufficient." Jack blinked. "What do you mean, insufficient? That's a perfectly good breakfast." The translator buzzed again. "Primitive." Jack put a hand to his chest, feigning offense. "Excuse me, Princess Space Lady, but those are name-brand flakes. They even have marshmallows. Primitive, my foot." Lyra didn't seem amused. She motioned to a sleek device on the counter that Jack hadn't noticed before. It looked like a blender had been fused with a glowing lava lamp. Inside was a swirling, iridescent liquid. "That," Jack said, pointing, "is either your breakfast or the thing that's going to kill me when it inevitably explodes." The translator replied, "Nutrition synthesis." "Safe." Jack grabbed a nearby mug and held it up. "I'll stick to coffee, thanks." He paused. "Wait, do aliens drink coffee? Please tell me you have coffee in space." Lyra stared at him blankly. "No coffee," Jack muttered. "Figures. You've got spaceships and cloaking tech, but no coffee. What a tragedy." Before Lyra could respond, or roll her eyes again, a sharp beeping sound filled the cabin. She froze, her golden eyes narrowing as she spun toward a floating control panel. Jack tensed. "That's not the good kind of beep, is it?" Lyra didn't need the translator for him to know the answer. She tapped furiously on the controls, and a holographic display appeared. On it, a cluster of glowing red dots moved in formation, converging on a central point, the cabin. Jack felt his stomach drop. "Let me guess, those are the hunters?" The translator replied, "Scouts. Proximity increasing." "Great," Jack muttered, grabbing his jacket. "Time to pack up and oh wait, this is my house, I can't leave." Lyra motioned for him to stay quiet, then pressed a button on the stabilizer. The hum in the air grew louder, and the cabin's glowing panels began to shift and rearrange themselves. The walls shimmered, and the force field over the windows flickered before solidifying again. "Are we cloaking?" Jack asked, his voice rising with hope. The translator replied, "Masking. Temporary." "Temporary?" Jack repeated. "Define temporary. Like 5 minutes? 5 hours?" Should I start digging a hole and hiding in it? Lyra ignored him, her focus entirely on the stabilizer. Jack groaned and ran a hand through his hair. Fantastic. I came out here to escape stress, and now I'm playing hide-and-seek with alien bounty hunters. My therapist is gonna love this. The holographic display shifted, showing the red dots moving closer. Jack leaned over to get a better look, accidentally knocking over a small alien device. It hit the floor with a metallic clink, and Lyra shot him a glare that needed no translation. Sorry, Jack whispered, picking it up. But maybe if you labeled this stuff, I wouldn't. The device in his hand lit up, and a thin, high-pitched whine filled the air. Jack froze. That's bad, isn't it? He asked. The translator buzzed. Destructive. Jack's eyes widened. Destructive? As in boom? Lyra snatched the device from his hand and pressed a sequence of buttons. The whine faded, and Jack let out a shaky breath. Okay, he said, backing away from the table. I'm officially on a strict don't-touch-anything policy. Happy? Lyra didn't respond, but the faintest smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. The tension was broken, albeit briefly, by another series of beeps from the control panel. Lyra's smirk vanished as she tapped the panel again. The holographic display zoomed in on the scouts, now dangerously close. Jack felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple. So, what's the plan here? Do we fight them? Hide? Bake them cookies and hope they leave us alone? Lyra pressed a button, and the translator replied, Divert. Divert? Jack echoed. How do we… Before he could finish, Lyra activated another device, and the stabilizer pulsed brightly. A burst of golden light shot into the sky, fading as quickly as it appeared. The translator buzzed. Signal. False trail. Jack frowned. Wait, you just sent out a fake signal? Like an intergalactic decoy? Lyra nodded. That's genius, Jack admitted, then paused. Unless, of course, they figure it out and come back angrier. Which they will, because my luck is terrible. The translator chimed. Likelihood minimal. Minimal? Jack said, raising an eyebrow. I'd like that in writing, please. The holographic display updated, showing the red dots hesitating, then breaking off in a new direction, toward the decoy signal. Jack let out a relieved sigh and collapsed into his recliner. Well, that was fun, he said sarcastically. Let's do it again sometime. Lyra powered down the stabilizer, the hum lowering to a soft purr. She glanced at Jack, her expression unreadable before turning back to her controls. Jack watched her for a moment, then said, You know, if you're going to keep crashing here, we need some ground rules. Like, maybe warn me before you turn my cabin into a glowing spaceship hideout, and definitely no more destructive devices on my coffee table. The translator buzzed. Understood. Jack smirked. Progress. But as he leaned back, his gaze drifted to the holographic display. The red dots were gone for now, but something told him this wasn't over. The hunters might be chasing a false trail, but they'd be back. And when they came, Jack had no idea if he or Lyra would be ready. For now, though, he'd take the win. After the scouts disappeared, Jack convinced himself he could finally relax. He grabbed a chair from the kitchen, dragged it to the porch, and sat down with a mug of black coffee, his personal talisman against chaos. The fresh mountain air, scented with pine and damp earth, worked its magic for all of 30 seconds before Lyra appeared in the doorway. Seriously? Jack said, looking over his shoulder. I thought aliens were supposed to be stealthy. Can't I have one moment of peace? She didn't respond, but her translator, now clipped to her belt, chimed. Work. Assistance required. Jack groaned. Look, I'm not exactly NASA. Whatever alien genius project you're working on, I'm pretty sure I'll just make it worse. Incorrect, the translator replied with annoying certainty. Jack sipped his coffee, glaring at her. Let me guess. You need me to press a glowing button, and if I press the wrong one, the cabin turns into a black hole. Lyra's expression didn't change, but he caught the faintest twitch of her silver eyebrows. Was that amusement? He wasn't sure, but it was enough to pique his curiosity. "Fine," Jack said, standing and setting his mug on the porch rail. "Lead the way, Space Princess." Inside, the cabin was more chaotic than ever. The stabilizer now had several new attachments, floating, spinning discs that emitted soft, rhythmic beeps. Another panel projected a map of the surrounding area, dotted with strange, flickering symbols. "What am I even looking at?" Jack asked, gesturing to the map. "Proximity grid," the translator replied. "Detects incoming threats." Jack frowned. "Great. So, it's like an alien Ring doorbell. Does it also record video of bears stealing my trash cans?" Lyra ignored him and pointed to a smaller device on the table. It was the size of a shoebox, covered in glowing runes that shifted and shimmered like liquid. "Repair," the translator said. "Repair what?" Jack asked. "Your ship? Your cloaking device? My sanity?" "Core stabilizer," the translator replied. "Malfunction imminent." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Imminent? As in, hurry up and fix it, or we're toast?" Lyra nodded. "Well, that's just fantastic," Jack muttered, leaning closer to the device. "What exactly do you need me to do? I don't speak alien, and I'm pretty sure duct tape isn't going to cut it." Lyra tapped a sequence on the stabilizer, and a holographic diagram appeared. It showed the device's internal components, overlaid with blinking red lines that clearly indicated something was wrong. She pointed to a specific section, then handed Jack a tool that looked like a cross between a screwdriver and a plasma torch. "Adjust," the translator said. Jack hesitated, staring at the tool. "Adjust what? This thing? What if I accidentally turn it into a bomb?" "Minimal risk," the translator replied.